Hi, this is Aaron Azrod, and welcome to the 59th episode of the Truth Island podcast. On our previous episode, I discussed the virtues of being frugal. In some sects of Buddhism, it is believed that a priest should own no more than 3 robes made out of discarded rags. The first robe was known as the Great Robe, in which a monk was only permitted to wear to a royal palace or on special occasion. The second robe, known as the outer robe, which was worn when monks performed rituals and attended lectures, and the third robe, known as the inner robe, was the robe that monks wore when working or resting. It was said that 3 such garments would suffice, and that a monk could always rely on one robe at a time if the other two needed washing or mending. While these rules might seem rigid, perhaps there is some important wisdom that can be gained by these men's empty closets. Today, Sam comes to us to share some of his experiences traveling around America with no more than a suitcase worth of clothing, and how each and every one of us might be able to learn from him and conjure up this same level of freedom in our own lives. Sam, have you come here to tell us that you are traveling with no more than 3 outfits today?
I am, Aaron. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about my 3 robes.
My pleasure.
I love that Buddhist idea. I can learn a lot from it, and I'm inspired by it. I am currently in Denver, Colorado, and a week ago I arrived here. I spent the night. I broke up my flight. I was on my way from Atlanta, Georgia, to Bismarck, North Dakota, for some church business, and the night before I was going to board my plane, which was Frontier Airlines. There's only 4 or 5 airlines that fly into Bismarck. I was checking in online, and I realized that if I brought anything bigger than the size of a laptop case, a laptop bag, or size of a woman's purse, something bigger than that, I was going to have to pay $50 to do that. And I'm always trying to cut costs, and as I say, work hard, not smart. I got up in the middle of the night. This is the night before I took off from Atlanta to Denver, the first leg of my journey, and I had pretty much just a duffel bag of clothes left after a huge purging. I was, forced to get out of my apartment. My roommate was getting married. I got up in the middle of the night, and I broke my duffel bag down one more time, and I officially broke it down to 3 outfits.
What?
Uh,
Oh my
I did.
goodness.
I
Now,
did.
for those who don't know, Sam was originally living in New York. He had a place there, and obviously he had clothing, like a closet worth of clothing. Tell me about the purging experience. I've got to get into your head. I would never in a million
Yeah.
years have the guts to do this. Tell us about it.
Well, it started about 6 months ago, right around the beginning of COVID. I resigned my job as a pastor, which was a huge deal. I didn't really have money. I didn't really have a plan. COVID struck. I was sheltering in place. I sold my car the day I resigned, which is a huge and radical step in Atlanta. Atlanta is the definition of the unwalkable city.
It's not no like subways everywhere, right? So that's
we've got MARTA, which is our abbreviated, truncated version of MTA. So there's a red and gold line that goes north south, and then a blue/green line that goes east west. So it's a big plus sign right in the middle of the perimeter of Atlanta. But most people don't take MARTA because it's not practical. It doesn't really get you where you need to go.
yeah.
But I relied on it, and I didn't have a car, and I sold my car for $2,500 because had less than $2,000 in my bank account, and I was scared. I got some money from President Donald Trump that helped a little bit. But still, those early months were rough financially, just anxious financially. But the bigger thing that was happening was I was sensing that change was happening in my life. I had resigned my job, and I knew change was coming. It's like the way an old person feels a storm coming, like in their bones. I knew that change was coming, in my life. Like I had resigned my job and I was thinking about leaving Atlanta. And so slowly but surely from about March till June, I just kind of sold off a lot of my things, took some things to Goodwill, got on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and just kind of whittled away at my stuff. And then I left to New York for 3 months, and I worked and I lived in an apartment in the East Village for 3 months, and acquired a few more things there. But as I anticipated going back to Atlanta, and the reason was my roommate was getting married, and he's like, "You and the other guy, who was his brother, need to get out of my house."
So this is actually something I didn't know. So you were actually slowly getting rid of your stuff even while you were in New York.
I was, and I came to New York on a July 17th on a one-way ticket, Spirit Airlines. The ticket was $14.11, right in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
It was a one-way ticket. I brought a backpack with, a pair of jeans, a pair of shorts for running, and three shirts. Black Lives Matter shirt that I had bought during the protests, and a God is Dope shirt, because I'm a Christian and that's what we do. And it's actually an Atlanta owned, black owned brand from Atlanta. It's kind of cool. And then I had one other shirt, and I just basically rotated those three shirts for 2 or 3 months. So I kind of was already operating out of the three robes philosophy. We're not even knowing about that.
Yeah, no, I mean this is incredible, and believe me, I've flown Spirit as well. It's pretty rough on those flights, right? The seat doesn't
Yeah,
even go back or anything like that,
no,
and they make you shove your book bag into that little square box. Like you're not getting an inch over them. Um,
no, no,
so it's really interesting because we all kind of complain about these things like, oh my God, Spirit, or I have to just bring a book bag worth of clothing. But when we think of our ancestors that came over, through the Mayflower or through all these like ships and these long, like 2 month long, like cross
yeah,
Atlantic journey, is it really that bad to be on Spirit for 3 hours and not be able to
no,
recline your
no,
seat a little bit?
no.
Given like the story of like human travel, it's an inconvenience and it's probably nicer to be on Delta or American, but at the same time, it's like for $14, you'll deal with it, right?
Yeah, I'll take a Spirit Airlines aircraft any day over a Mayflower or a Viking ship or anything like that. So
Yeah.
it was good, and it's thinking about our ancestors is good. I think I mean, we don't want to speak about them uniformly because I'm sure one was different from the other, but basically, they probably were able to hold things loosely, and they had to. They were leaving the old world and never to return. And the night, and just to bring it all back to speed, people were moved with pity for me in New York because they realized after a while, hey, bro, you're wearing the same shirt every 3 days, and so people gave me clothes at work, which was really cool. I mean, it was almost like a drive, like collects clothes for Sam drive, and that was great. And when I got back to New York, I was really inspired, even more, even though people had been generous with me, maybe because they had been generous with me, to just live as minimally as possible.
Wow.
And so, after I was back in Atlanta for a week or two and broke everything down, I love my books. I've worked hard to build kind of a books collection, a combination of things, genres, and I'm proud of my little collection. It's not big, but I saved 3 boxes of books and a duffel bag. And the night before I boarded my next plane out west, this is after my New York adventure, I realized that I was going to have to go even further. So I woke up in the middle of the night before I left, and I sorted, things into a trash bag and then into a Goodwill bag, and it left me with. I'm back to the three robes. So thank you all the New Yorker people that gave me clothes and were moved with pity for me, but I'm back down to three robes, and I got to Denver, and I didn't want to bring anything more than a parcel because I didn't want to be charged $50 by Frontier Airlines. And so I brought a suit because I needed a suit for Sunday, for the church day, for I was helping with an ordination service and preaching a sermon in the morning at a Presbyterian church
And that
in
would be like your royal robe. Like with the monks, they had like one really royal outfit that they wear in the
yeah,
palaces. So you have like that suit, which is like your royal suit almost.
exactly. So that would be technically one of my, I would say one of my three robes, three outfits, you know. And so I carried it in a paper bag, just a plain paper bag. And I
Wow.
had stuffed in there my, my suit. It's just an ordinary suit, as far as, no insignia, or it's not church robes, but I stuffed it all in there in a paper bag, and I had a toothbrush. I didn't even bring toothpaste, and my mouth guard, because I grind my teeth at night.
I wear one of those
So
too, by the way.
nice, man, nice. We must have the same anxiety running through
Yeah,
us
right. Us
when we
us
sleep.
philosopher thinkers have all this.
Yeah,
It's fine.
yeah, yeah. So I stuffed all that in a bag and a journal, because I keep a journal.
Yeah.
And as soon as I got off the train in Denver, got off the airplane, got on the train, it's about a 25-mile trip to the city. I got off at Union Station, and I was going to meet my friend there and stay at his house. And the bag had just gotten, you know how paper bags get kind of soft,
Yeah,
like
when
the
it's
paper gets
when it's wet, yes.
what, well, not just when it's wet, but when it's kind of worked, like it's been like
Ah,
folded and refolded and like
yeah.
kind of crumpled and held, only over a day or so. And so I got off the train and I walked about 20 feet, and I tripped on a step right outside of Union Station in Denver, and the bag kind of swung. And because of the kind of the softness and it had become kind of fragile, the bag just ripped wide open, and my suit it was strewn all over the sidewalk in
Oh
front of
my
Union Station.
goodness.
And I thought, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And it's at moments like that I feel I'm proud of myself for working my wardrobe down to the three Buddhist robes. But at the same time, when something like that happens, or I've had trouble finding a place to stay last minute, it's at moments like that I regret, or I doubt myself. I'm thinking about all the people who are working smart, not hard right now, who actually have an apartment and who have a wardrobe and things and furniture and a car. And it's at moments like that where you feel where I feel more vulnerable.
Yes, and I really thank you for sharing that, because with the three robe system, there is some beauty to it, but there is also a dark side as well. Like
There is.
there are things, like it's not just fun and games, because you're really carrying your life possessions with you, and if something
Yeah,
happens to that duffel bag or whatever, then you're at the basically the clothes off your back, so to speak. And that's hard, and that's like an unsettling thought. I'm wondering, like, if you did lose two of your outfits, do you think that there would be a Salvation Army or some place where you'd be able to replenish the other two or three garments?
totally. I do. I'm not worried about that. And, you've got to kind of keep yourself a little clean, especially if you only have, right now, I just have my suit from the ordination service. And then I have this red shirt that you see me wearing, and, basically the clothes on my back.
Yes.
And so I've got to stay a little clean. I'm not going to go run across Denver right now and work up a sweat. And, yeah, I don't know. I can always, people are always wanting to give me more stuff. And I have to kind of resist them a little bit and say, I don't trust myself with material things, and neither should you.
Wow.
And my friends in North Dakota were just moved with, honestly, I mean, they probably felt bad. They're like, what's wrong with this guy?
No, no,
Moved with,
this is something that I actually talked with Christopher on frugality, in that he walks by and sometimes he'll see flat screen televisions that people just throw out, and they'll even put like
yeah,
notes on it, and it says, works fine or whatever. There's something actually empowering by being like, no, I don't want it, or I don't need it, or I don't trust myself. Like, there's actually something very, very, very liberating and empowering when you can kind of operate with less and not more in a way.
Yeah. I think I feel bad for my mom growing up because I think that she wanted to give me things, at Christmas, shirts or books, or, she wasn't really into electronics, but, anything that she wanted to give me, I held so loosely from such an early age. And I don't know where I developed this, I'm gonna call it kind of a mendicant friar mindset. So in the Middle Ages, the mendicant friars were brothers in a monastery that just made their living from what people gave them, I don't know where I developed that. But I feel bad because I think I never really held on to things. This is going to make me sound like a total jerk or whatever, but I regifted a lot of the things that people gave me growing up because it was like,
Mm,
I just don't want this. I don't want to acquire possessions. It's not my goal. And the less I have, the freer I feel. I know that at some point I'm going to have to bite the bullet, if I want to get married and have a family. I'm going to have to buy a minivan, and I'm going to have to have a house and a garage full of stuff. I know that, but maybe that doesn't have to happen. I guess I'm just kind of waiting for that and dreading that in some ways. And I don't know how to really process that.
it's tough, and I'm telling you right now, like if you get a girlfriend or a wife, she's gonna want
Yeah.
you to have new things. Like just a few weeks ago, my girlfriend just threw away our pillows and bought new pillows. I was like, no, 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 it's perfectly fine. And she's like, it's stained, it's dirty, you need new pillow. I'm like, ah. So believe me, once you get married, the whole three robes, the three robes are gonna turn into 50 robes at that at that point. But what I think it is, Sam, and again, this is just I can't get into your head, but my conjecture on this is that as we are more spiritually aligned or more in touch with our soul, we kind of rely less on the corporeal, like we
Yeah.
rely less on the body. And I,
Yeah.
I think that this is something that was once in vogue in spirituality, is this idea of like living off the soul and not so much living off the body. But I think that has kind of faded away. I think even Buddhist monks today don't just follow the three robe. I think they've actually discarded that system, and with good reason. Like the industrial age allowed us to produce all of these clothings really really
Yeah.
cheaply, like, right? And you can go to
Yeah.
Target and get like a bunch of t-shirts for probably I've actually bought t-shirts before, like my Star Wars little t-shirts, six
Yeah.
bucks a pop or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think a lot of this has to do with technology and just being able to mass produce all of this stuff, which has given the average person more clothing that they can possibly handle. I even
Yeah.
think of like early professors, like that image of the professor with the patch or something like on their
Yeah.
on their
Yeah.
on their
Yeah.
jacket.
Yeah.
The reason they would have a patch is because professors were so poor at that point that if
Yeah.
their one suit got torn, they have to put a patch on it. And most
Yeah.
people had patches on their clothing because they could not afford to just buy a whole nother wardrobe.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this comes at a cost because it gives us this high level of anxiety of like, oh my God, what if there was a fire? What if I lost all of this stuff? What would I do? What would I do?
Yeah.
What would I do?
Yeah. And now those patches on those professors' tweed jackets are trendy. Uh, so way to go, professors. Yeah, and I think I was thinking about that too. I have a little bit of worst case scenario thinking. Uh, that's kind of a Midwestern way of thinking in some ways. It's like you don't know if your crops are going to die, and so or what's going to happen to the markets, and we can't count on the weather or something like that. And so we just plan for the worst a lot of the times, in our minds. And I think I have that. And I think like the fewer things that I have, the fewer things can go wrong. It's so nice yeah, it's so nice to not worry. It's so nice to not
Yes.
worry about my car. I don't have a car. I mean, now, does that come with a cost? Do I have to walk more, even in a city like Denver?
Mm.
Do I have to take the bus more and the train more? Yeah. Am I limited where I can go? Yes. But I don't have to worry about dropping a surprise $1,200 on, a transmission or whatever. I don't even know anymore because I'm so out of it with cars. But even with electronics, like I don't have to worry about things breaking. And so again, is there a cost in not having a TV? Is there a cost in not having an iPad or a laptop? None of which I have. Yes, there is. It'd be easier to do the Zoom call if I had a laptop. But it's also a load off of my mind to not have to worry about things breaking or things not working.
I think you touched upon something really valuable here, Sam, and that is our fear of loss. I think
Yeah.
a lot of our anxiety comes from this fear of loss. Like, oh my God, if I lost this, if my car broke down, what would I do? What would I do? What
Yeah.
would I do? But I think even if, let's say, you do get married and then you go to have you go on to own a home and do a whole bunch of other stuff, I
Right.
think that this is a good mental reference point for you in your head, because when you own a home one day, or you do any of these things, you can always think back, hey, there was a time in my life where I had three robes and I made it work. And I think
Yeah.
that that's a good, and people, if you talk to people, unfortunately, so many of these people have already passed away, but if you talk to people who lived through the Great Depression, they have that mental calibration in their head. So like
Yeah.
I think of my grandma, who could exist in a one bedroom apartment and not have cable and not have this and that, but
Yeah.
because her frame of reference is like so like depleted, like when she was like living in Nazi occupied Belgium, she was eating moldy stale bread. Because she has
Yeah.
this very diminished frame of reference, it then allows her to kind of appreciate the things that she has, and maybe even say, to some degree, I mean, no one wants to get robbed or anything, but there's also this idea of like, I've been here before. I've
Yeah.
been in this situation here before, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. It's a great way of looking at it. And I hope that I can recall certain times of my life, like right now, and draw kind of inspiration and instruction at all times. And it's interesting bringing up the depression because I've tried to figure out where this comes from for me, where this burning desire to live so minimalistically comes from. And I don't fully know. I know that I was maybe, I don't want to say OCD, but a little OCD growing up about like our home, and there was like clutter everywhere and that bugged me. And I was just like, why do we even have to have this stuff? If we didn't even have the stuff, we wouldn't have the clutter. You know what I'm saying? And I think my family and my parents and my home probably fed into that. But I think I was thinking about my grandmother, who was sort of like a second mother to me. She grew up on the same property as us in rural Iowa, or I grew up with her, sorry. And she was born in 1919, so she came of age during
Wow.
the war, between the wars,
Yeah.
between the two wars. And then she got married in the middle of the Great Depression when she was 18 years old. And she had her first child, in 1939, still in the Depression for us, the first year of the war in Europe. And, and she was the daughter of a German immigrant. And I think she came up real hard Scrabble, and I think that her influenced me. I think that I've had to think, in more frugal ways my whole life. I grew up kind of poor as well, and so I think my parents had influence there, but I think my grandma did too. And I think the Great Depression, I'm sort of a grandchild of the Great Depression. And I'm glad for those traits because they're not really common in our world.
Mm.
And you asked me about the role that, like, how the pressures that we face to be materialistic. I think
Yes.
I think Instagram is a great. I talked about this in another podcast, how Instagram can incite discontentment in ways that you don't anticipate or realize that you are possible. And I think that can happen. Instagram can incite discontentment with where you're at in life, like your station in life, your job and your calling and your career. But I think that Instagram, I don't want to single them out, throw them under the bus, but just to use them as an example, I think they can incite discontentment in a material way as well. And I think my upbringing has kind of helped prepare me to fend off kind of the seductions of Instagram and other things like that. So I want to be kind of an old soul in this respect. I don't, I can be like my forebears, like the immigrants that came before me, and I can be like my grandma, but it does take discipline and it really takes intentionality.
Yes, yes. And I think I love what you're saying here. And I think also television does a huge role in this. And
Yeah.
television hits us in a number of ways because you've got the overt commercials, but then you also have, like, most television shows, Sam, deal with like rich people or upper middle class. Like most, like the if you look at most sitcoms or just shows, everyone's pretty well to do.
Yeah,
Like
they are.
they may come off as middle class, but you're like, what, that guy is a, is a whatever, but he's, like, even like I think of that show, the Brady Bunch, right? It's
Yeah.
like the guy was like an architect, but he had a beautiful home and all this other stuff. So you're constantly being inundated with these images of abundance, and I think that kind of plants insecurity into our souls, or insecurity into our happiness, and into our state of being. And maybe this generation has gotten away from the television and now they are living off Instagram, but that is basically serving the same function of like, and I think of this, I think of all of these guys who are, posing in front of their Lamborghinis and putting that on their dating profile or putting that on Instagram. And it's
Yeah.
like, it's really, you're sending out, you're not meaning to be negative. Like what you're doing, you think you're doing something positive, but what you're actually doing is you're probably satisfying your own insecurity, but then you're also sending insecurity out into the universe.
Yeah. It's funny. I lived in New York for 3 months, as you know, Aaron, and I hope to be back after my adventures in the interior of America. But when I was living in the East Village, and I found an apartment on Craigslist. I paid $1,100 a month for an apartment, which was staggering to me.
That is, yeah.
You know, and it was small. It was tiny, but I'm glad I did it. It was a good experience for me as my first time. Really, well, it was just great living in the city, and even though COVID was going on and stuff like that. But it's funny to think about like Carrie Bradshaw. She the girl from Sex and the City, and she's like a freelance writer, and she has this amazing apartment in the Upper East Side or Upper West Side, and
Wow.
and the girl from Friends lives in Greenwich Village, and it's just like how and they make it look like effortless and painless to be able to afford something like that. And I think, just to use that apartment as an example of the way that pop culture, whether it's TV shows or Instagram, projects a certain kind of life to aspire to. And
Hmm.
we all, I mean, I met a girl while I was in New York. In the short time I was there, who was like, "Yeah, I want to be like Carrie Bradshaw." She had like a bunch of shoes, and her apartment was kind of like cool like that. And she's like, "I'm just a modern day Carrie Bradshaw." Is that the girl's name? I don't even know.
Yeah,
But
I'm so disconnected from
yeah,
every.
yeah. But
You're
I was
asking the
like,
wrong guy, Sam.
I was like, this girl is just like everybody else. She just said it out loud. She wants to live the dream. And there is kind of a millennial dream that we want to live. And there's different forms of it. Maybe you've got like a van, and you're able to drive around the country, and you can camp where you want to go. And or you have a really cool apartment. I'm staying in a really cool apartment here in uptown Denver. It's super trendy.
Mm-hmm.
Have a dog, or but every form of that dream involves the acquisition of things. And I'm not rejecting that necessarily, but I'm just trying to find my own sweet spot. And I genuinely feel more relieved, more happy, more clean cut in terms of like life itself when I have fewer things. And I can't completely explain it. It's just the way it is for me.
No, and you know what? And I think it's also important. Like I was saying this before, is that i- it's important for people to respect each other's lifestyle. So
Yeah.
when you go to that rich girl's house in Greenwich Village, you shouldn't be like, you don't need all these shoes. Like, you don't need that fancy. You don't want to be that annoying guy who's like,
Yeah.
you don't need all this. I live out of a suitcase.
No.
You don't want to be that annoying person, because
No.
for all you know, they're very happy with their 50 high heels or whatever it is that
Exactly.
they're collecting. And it's really a choice for them to make. But conversely, they also have to be respectful of you, Sam. I feel like
Yeah.
they can't go and be like, oh, you poor thing, or why don't you, buckle down here and work some overtime or whatever. Like, they have to also be understanding that, like, hey, this person is perfectly happy having less. Let me not project my own insecurities onto someone else. And what I think happens is that sometimes, and I hate to say this, but sometimes friends spend more money than they should on something, and they
Yeah.
actually feel a bit insecure about it. And
Yeah.
then the way that they compensate for that insecurity is they go up to other people and say, look what I have, or why don't you have this, or I just got this. Like there's a lot of I just got this thing. And what they're trying to do is, I think that they know that that purchase may or may not have been the right thing, but they're seeking validation from the world to tell them, like, oh, whoa, that's totally worth it, or yeah, you totally made the right thing. And I think we have to start becoming a lot more mindful when we see that going on in this world, Sam.
Yeah, great examples, man. I'm always impressed at your ability to synthesize points and information on this podcast. And I'm not just saying that so you'll have me back. I,
Thank you.
I mean, I mean that genuinely. You gave the example yesterday with Christopher of going to buy the Tesla, and getting in
Yeah.
there and realizing you're not ready to close the deal, and then the feeling of kind of jubilation when you drive away and you're like, I'm fine with this car that I have, even though it's not a Tesla. um, and I feel that too. And I think 10 years ago, I'm glad you didn't meet me 10 years ago. And I'll probably be an even better person and a cooler person and more loyal person in 10 years from now. I hope
Can't
to be.
imagine that, my friend. Like, you seem pretty
Yeah.
perfect right now.
Thanks, man. Thanks, man. Yeah, it's very nice of you. But 10 years, I mean, that's really kind of you because, it feels like there's always more to learn, and 10 years ago, 12 years ago, high school, college, even into my 20s, I would have been a lot more judgmental of people. Like, I remember telling somebody, like, they asked me if this was an okay purchase. I don't even know if they asked me. I think it was just unsolicited. And I was like, they were a Christian person. And I was like, oh, that's the Lord's money. Is that how you're going to use the Lord's money? Because like
Wow.
the Christian perspective is like all that we have is it really belongs to God in the first place, and that's why we can give freely and be generous. But like that was manipulative of me to say that, it was true theologically. Like, yeah, I mean, if God is the Lord of heaven and earth, then he owns everything, right? Um, and so, but it was the way I said it. And I think I've had to unlearn some of that and hold my opinions loosely. I think I was really judgmental towards my mom growing up because I felt like my mom was kind of cluttery and like wasn't good at, like, she didn't have the same, I didn't think the same level of frugality that my grandma did. And so I looked up to my grandma more than my mom. And I was, I think, kind of, judgmental of her. And I regret that. There is, as you said, a dark side to this as well, because I've had moments. I mean, when I went to North Dakota a year and a half ago, when my friend first moved there, I was thinking about moving there. I led him on a trip and I was like, oh yeah, I know somebody in Fargo, because we were driving from Minneapolis to Bismarck through Fargo on Interstate 94. I was like, oh, I know somebody in Fargo, we'll be okay. And I thought I had an Airbnb. And then I was like, oh, I need to get an Airbnb, but that fell through. And then it's like 10 o'clock at night and we don't have any place to stay because I was either overconfident or B, I was living in a minimal way, but hadn't kind of planned for it. And so here, me and my friend, and now he's affected too, are stranded. I mean, we found a place to stay eventually, but there's moments where of fear. It's like, am I going to be completely homeless tonight? Am I going to be safe? There's also the feeling of like, I don't want to impose on anyone. I'm staying with
Yes.
a friend in Denver right now, and he's being very generous with me. He's got a really nice pull-out couch, and I'm allowed to sort of just like make myself at home in his apartment, and it's very comfortable and nice. But I don't want to just people have their own apartments for a reason so that they can be alone, and here I am kind of in his space. And I mean, he's very generous and kind. He would never say anything, but that comes from my upbringing as well. My grandma and my dad were very rigorous about not being an imposition to people. If you stay in people's homes, you
Mm.
leave no trace, LNT. When I was in 8th grade, my dad left me in the charge of my uncle and his family, my dad's brother. And as he pulled out, he wasn't like, "Hey son, I love you." He's like, he pulled up, rolled down the window as he was pulling out. He goes, "Don't be ingratiating." So like my dad and my grandma like forced this idea on me that like it's a sin, almost a sin to be an imposition to someone. And so be a good guest. My dad is like, that's like at the heart of my dad's worldview is like, be a good guest. And it's a good lesson, right?
Right.
But it makes it stressful because then I'm like, do I pay, like give someone an honorarium for staying in their house for 5 days? Like, okay, $10 a day times 5, but let me take off 5 because I'm kind of poor. So 40, it's like, how do I figure out, do I Venmo them some money? Do I just stay for free or pick up some tabs at, a restaurant? What do I do? How do I show my good faith in this situation and not be a burden? That was big for my dad. Don't be a burden to people, you
Yes.
know? And so how do you balance that? And I fear being in a position sometimes.
I appreciate you bringing these up because you're actually touching upon some of the nuances here of living a minimalistic lifestyle. Is that
Yeah.
sometimes, and it's the same thing with these Buddhist monks, is that they actually have to carry begging bowls with them wherever they
Yeah.
go. They
Yeah.
have to just eat whatever is provided. So like they will come down and like whatever food is put in their bowl, they can't be like, no, this is stale, or I'm feeling like fish today. They have to, they kind of have to just eat with whatever is given to them.
Yeah.
And I always find it like this is that when you're kind of asking of others, one, never ending gratitude. That's an
Yeah.
absolute must. Thousand,
Yeah.
there's no such thing as too many thank yous in this kind of
No,
thing. Even if
no.
it's to the point of annoying, like always say thank you. I remember a very good friend of mine was nice enough. He actually invited me to stay with him in France. So I stayed like 2 weeks with him in his in his
Yeah.
apartment, and he did invite me, but I was like, let me buy the groceries, or let me take you out to dinner, or whatever it is. And like, yeah, I was coming from a place where I had enough money that I could be that sort of help, or to be that kind of assistance. But it could be something as simple as like, hey man, I just decided to clean your kitchen today, or hey, I just decided to
Yeah.
like throw out the garbage, or I put the dishes away, or I
Right.
noticed that that little thing was broken, and just leaving some kind of shine, or something nice behind. And it could
Yeah.
be a monetary thing, like hey, I decided to fill the fridge with groceries even though you didn't say anything, or it could be
Right.
I decided to tidy up, I decided to do your laundry, whatever it is that you can do. And then just knowing at some point, okay, it's been 5 days, it's been whatever, it's kind of time to move on.
Totally. Totally.
I gotta get on Craigslist. I gotta contact the church, or I gotta get
Yes.
back on my
Yes.
feet and figure out some way of where my next destination is. And I think if you live by that, by that creed, and you follow those rules, I think you won't be seen as like an imposition, or this like burden in the house. I
Yeah.
think you'll be seen as this like wonderful ghost kind of just passing on through, and bringing
Yeah.
joy and wonder for 5 days. Because
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I think that like if somebody stays in your home for 5 days and they brought nothing but great conversation, laughter, and love
Yes.
for those
Yes.
5 days, then that person will actually miss you, and they'll be like, when are you coming
Yeah.
back? And like,
Yeah.
man, I really
Yeah.
missed having Sam. And that's totally different than staying somewhere for like 2 months and being like, hey, we're out of coffee, would you mind picking up some more? Like there's a radical difference between those things.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. When I first, so when I came to New York in July 17th, it was a Friday, and I meant to visit just for 2 or 3 weeks. I bought a one-way ticket because I wasn't sure how long I would uh, need to really see the city and people that I love. I got there on that one-way ticket. I had that backpack with the 3 shirts and the shorts and the jeans, and I ended up staying for 3 months, almost exactly 3 months. And the first 21 days, basically, let's just say first 3 weeks, I stayed in 7 different places in 4 different boroughs.
Wow.
And it was crazy. I got to see the city. It was stressful though. Like one night I got back from Rockaway Beach. I was staying with a friend in South Slope, Brooklyn. And we had spent the whole day at Rockaway Beach. I got back to his place. He went off with his girlfriend somewhere. So I was back at the apartment by myself. I gathered my things, took a shower, tried to feed myself really quickly. And then I took the train all the way up to Harlem. And this was like at 11 o'clock at night. And because I had sort of determined like I had stayed enough days at that house in Park Slope. And it was like 5 days. I didn't want to wear out my welcome. And then I got to Harlem and I slept in them. And then I got to Harlem and I realized like I was staying with my friend, but he didn't really have space. He was just being nice. And I felt bad. I was like, I'm right in the middle of their living room. Like one of the roommates loves to play video games right there on the couch. And I'm kind of cramping his style. And it's, everybody has to kind of tiptoe around me. They feel because if they want to get up in the middle of the night and grab a glass of water or something from the kitchen, they have to pass right by where I'm sleeping. And
Mm.
I felt bad. I mean, I think New York kind of forced me to think through this issue in a way more rigorously because there's not a lot of, it's not like these are all houses in the suburbs where you have like a guest room or like a whole
Yeah,
wing of the
right.
house that's
Yeah.
like unused. It's like everybody's on top of each other already, and then you're staying here too. So I think the unique environment of New York and how small the apartments were forced me to get on Craigslist more quickly and find that apartment in the East Village. But just recently I went back and I went through the list of people, and I haven't been able to give money to everybody, but I really believe in the love languages. I like what you said, like acts of service or like a thank you note or even just positive vibes, just bringing good vibes into the home. But also money. I think money is great. And like I don't have a ton of money right now, but I have a little bit. I made some money in New York. Thank you, City of New York, for your high taxes and high rent, but also for the little bit of money that you allowed me to make during
You're
COVID
welcome,
19.
Sam. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor De Blasio and Governor Cuomo, for your hot dogs. No, I'm just kidding. And so I have a little bit of money. So I just went back through and I was like, who uniquely enabled me to stay? I could not have done what I did if, Justin and Karen Weber hadn't let me stay on their couch for 4 or 5 days in South Slope when I first got there. And I couldn't have done it without this person who gave me some clothing from the restaurant. And I couldn't have done it without my roommate back in Atlanta who let me keep my stuff there for a month or two, September kind of time frame, August, September. And so I just went back and I was like, I tried to kind of tally up like what that meant to me financially. And I was able, and not in every case, but in some cases, to just drop like 25 or 50, or in one case, more than $50 on Venmo and just say, thank you so much. And people you can't just go around just like giving money to everybody, but
Yeah, yeah.
I think people were kind of surprised by it. Justin and Karen were like, "You really didn't have to do that, but thank you. Thank you for that. Like it's not like it's gonna like pay their rent for a month. It's $50,
Yeah.
but like I could not have had my New York experience without you, and just recognizing that and trying to." I think you said it well, just trying to find ways of whether it's filling the fridge with food or whatever, just trying to find ways of showing your appreciation is important.
Absolutely. And I think what allows all of this to happen, Sam, is your extreme level of mindfulness. Like, hey, this guy over here is playing video games and I'm sort of in his way. And I
Yeah.
think that's the most important quality. I don't even know how one begins to teach that. Like, I think this is like a quality, and I think we could even save this for another podcast of like how
Yeah.
we teach this mindfulness of like, how do I envision the discomfort that I'm causing somebody else? And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people have forgotten about how to enter that state of mindfulness. And I think
Yeah.
that important. One last thing I want to touch upon, since you
Yeah.
are continuing with the 3 wardrobes, and this is something I'm just scratching my head, is we are in the fall right now, and we will be transitioning into winter. So I'm wondering how you're juggling the warm clothes, the cold clothes, the shorts. Like, are you going to just get rid of
Yeah.
the shorts and then trade those in for jeans, and then when it gets warmer, like, I'm wondering how
Uh,
you.
yeah, it's a good question. I got back to Denver last night, and there were 6 inches of snow in Bismarck and or in North and South Dakota when I was there. So I had to borrow boots, and at one point we went sledding on the back of snowmobiles. Oh my goodness, it was pretty country up there. But I had to borrow a Carhartt like coveralls and boots and like a hunting hat and gloves, and I had to borrow stuff from people. And that's another area where it's like, you don't want to assume that you can
Yeah.
borrow. You don't want to impose, I guess, goes back to that whole, Bell's, that's my last name, Bell's family tradition. Don't impose, um, but don't be a burden. But at the same time, like they had extra stuff, and I kind of assumed that people have extra stuff and I'm going to borrow. And I got back to Denver last night. My friend was like, "Hey, did you buy some more clothes in North Dakota?" I was like, "No." He's like, "It's going to be cold here. It's been really cold here this last week in Denver." And we were out this morning getting coffee, and it actually wasn't that cold. I've got like a pea coat that I've been wearing. I don't have really any warm clothes. I mean, I have this one pair of kind of dress boots that I wore for my church business this past weekend. The socks that I'm wearing are not warm really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're gonna go out tonight and get ramen, and we'll probably sit outside, and hopefully there's heat lamps. I don't know. There's going to be some survival. I was cold walking from Union Station to uptown Denver last night. But I kept moving, and if I really get desperate, I'll either borrow what I need from a friend or just buy some extra socks or whatever. Because I actually just have one pair of socks right now.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
and so I'm not going to talk about my underwear situation. That's a little much for this podcast. But no, I think what you said too is good. Like I'll have to swap some things out. I just got rid of my last pair of shorts. I
Mm.
donated it to Goodwill. And then when it gets to be warm again and wherever I am in the spring, I'll have to acquire some shorts somehow,
Now,
you know?
all of
Yeah.
this, all of this is obviously, and I can hear it. It's a bit, anxiety
Yeah.
inducing.
Yeah, it is.
But at the same time, it's like, in if you're following like Buddhist philosophy, you're really, really, really in the present. Like this kind of state
Yeah.
of mind is really, because you're not thinking about any other season than the
No,
exact set of
no.
garments that you're going to need for December or for November or so forth. And again, there isn't, like, I'm not trying to make this seem like it's a rosy lifestyle, because you do
No.
have that anxiety of like, oh my goodness, there might be 6 inches of snow and I might need to get boots or something like that. But then
Yeah.
on the flip side of that, it's really like tossing you into the present moment. You have no choice but to grapple with the present, and there is beauty in that. So there is like, there's two sides. There's two sides to this coin in many respects.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way, but you're right. I aspire to be someone who is present, with the people that I'm with, but also just with the world and kind of one with the world around me. And I never thought about it, but you're right. This kind of minimalist lifestyle, living out of a suitcase lifestyle, is really forces you to think about what you need in the moment. When I was in North Dakota, one of the guys that came up from Atlanta to help with the ordination commission, which is a church idea. He was an elder. He forgot his DOP kit, his like toiletries,
Yeah.
and so he went to the local store, IGA in Lemon, South Dakota, the grocery store, and bought a 12-pack of disposable razors. And I didn't have a razor. I don't shave every day. I'm just not built that way. But I said, "Hey, can I have one of the, can I buy one of those?" I always offer like, can I buy, I don't want to assume,
Yeah.
can
Right.
I have one of those razors? And so it was a 12 pack and all he needed was one. And so he used his one. and then he gave me the other 11 disposable razors, and I took one and then left the other,
10.
the
Yeah.
other 10 there. And I guess I could have brought them with me. It's like, oh shoot, like jackpot, I got 10 razors. I That's something I can cross off the list for the next 2 months,
Yeah,
probably, or
yeah.
something like that. But I just left them in the cupboard, in the cabinet, in my friend's bathroom in North Dakota, because it was like, I have these rules that I'm trying to follow, of like, it's not a religion. It's not a religion. It's just like discipline rules, like, I am not I could bring these 10 razors and be good financially on razors for 2 months, or I could just bring one and then kind of cast the dice for the next season, and hopefully another razor will come. And if it doesn't, then I guess I'll just have to buy one. But it's those kind of like constant like risk analysis that you have to do
But
with it.
that's like an empowering move right there to leave, and that's a beautiful story, by the way, because
Thank you.
that's a very empowering move where it's like, I could take the security of these 10 razors, right? Like I
Yeah.
could bring these 10 shaving, and those Mach 3 razors are expensive, by the way. They're like
Yeah.
$30 a
Yeah.
package or something, really expensive.
Right.
And it's almost as if, like, in one way, if you had taken those 10 razors with you, right? And you have
Yeah.
been like, okay, this is gonna ease my anxiety. But then, in a way, you're opening the door to worry about something else. Because now you've
Yes.
taken the 10 razors, but then your mind is going to turn, oh, shoot, I need more socks now. Or, oh, shoot,
Yeah.
I need more
Yeah.
of this.
Yeah.
But when you leave the 10 razors behind, then you're
Yeah.
like, I don't need those razors. And then your mind doesn't fall into the trap of thinking, oh man, I need more socks now, or I need more whatever.
Yeah.
So in that way, when you actually forego something, it actually gives you mental energy and mental power to then not worry about the next thing.
Yeah, it kind of frees up. It's like a computer, like RAM on a computer. It frees up that space for something else. And it's also character forming, because, like you said, if you feel the freedom to let the 10 razors go, then you're going to be less inclined to be worried about the fact that you only have one pair of socks, and stuff like that. And it just feels so clean to arrive last night at my friend's apartment, and I do have one razor and I do have one toothbrush. Now, am I assuming that even in COVID I can borrow my friend's toothpaste, or other toiletries? Yeah, like, I didn't floss my teeth last night because I couldn't find my friend's floss, and I didn't bring floss because that was like, beyond beyond what I wanted to carry in my paper bag on the way to Denver.
Right.
But I try to floss every night. I'll try to figure out that situation, but there is a risk you're going to have to do without. And it kind of chafes against any, perfectionism that you may bring to the table, that everything needs to follow the exact same routine every day. But for some reason, it feels really freeing to me. And
Yes.
I'll keep you posted, because I'm kind of in the early stages of this level of minimalism, where I really don't have any possessions or even a house right now to fall back on. I don't want to say I'm homeless, because that might scare you off, but it's I'm in the early stages, so definitely keep you
No,
posted.
and thank you, and Sam, thank you for your incredible candor here, because
Yeah.
I think sometimes we have this image of like the hikers that go backpacking and travel Europe, and it's nothing but
Yeah.
funny photos and smiles. But
Yeah.
thank you for actually being on the show today and giving a really genuine account of what this is, because it's not all rosy and living off living off the land, so to speak. There is anxiety, and there are things that you have to kind of mentally calculate. Sam, thank you so much for being on the show today.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
This concludes the 59th episode of the Truth Island podcast. I'm Aaron Azrod.